Welcome back to the Walk the Talk show. This is episode 10. So every Thursday, friends of the Bitcoin community connect online for this live stream. Every Saturday, we take it off. We step away from the noise, we get outside, and we were discussing how we fix the money and fix the world. If that resonates with you, wherever you are right now, here's your invitation. Put down your phone, go touch some grass, and have a real conversation with someone about why sound money matters and what it means for the future of our communities. Head to bitcoinwalk.org and find a walk near you, or even better, start one in your town. You don't need a permission, you just go. I'm Endo. Our guest today is Lawrence Lepard. Um, Let me add him to the screen. Lawrence is a good friend and a Bitcoin walk aficionado as well, an investment manager, a venture capitalist, and a sound money advocate. I think you can say that Lawrence is an Austrian economics at heart and overall a very, a voice of reason in the world of fiat debasement. From what I know, Larry fell into the sound money rabbit hole after 2008 crisis, after more than 2 decades in mainstream finance and venture capital, and set himself on a mission to educate about the dangers of monetary debasement, to bring his decades of experience in the macro analysis to the world of sound money through gold, silver, and now Bitcoin. He's the author of the bestseller book, The Big Print, a project that ties his 4 decades of investment experience to his passion of explaining the broken monetary system and just charting the path forward to sound money. Larry, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Endo, it's really nice to be with you. Nice to see you again, even though it's not in person. Last time we saw one another, we were walking up a beautiful hill in Edinburgh. I don't know what was that. What was the name of that place that called? It was really something, right? Um, so nice to be back with you.
It's it's called the Arthur. It's called the Arthur's Seat.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, beautiful
It's
place.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. How have you been?
I've been fine, thank you. It's been a couple of years since then, and we've had some ups and downs of Bitcoin. I guess more recently, until a few days ago, it was all down, and now we're back into the ups again, which is kind of nice to see and not
Yeah.
unexpected. I think we were. It feels to me like maybe we put in the bottom here, and we're going to go on another run. We'll see.
So I'm super happy to actually have the opportunity to talk to you today because Bitcoin is like you go to sleep and you wake up and Bitcoin is like 70, 71, 72K again, and it's one of those gradually then suddenly moments where Bitcoin takes everybody by surprise. But I guess that's what's coming. Could you maybe from your perspective give us an overview of what you think happened in the last 48 hours?
Yeah, let's go back a little longer than that, maybe the last 2 weeks, because it kind of started about a week and a half ago. So these are macro events that I think have driven this move. The Japanese currency, the Japanese country is very heavily indebted, more indebted than we are actually, and had very low interest rates for a long time, more than we did. And so their currency was used as a carry trade currency. And over time, people have been losing faith in that whole concept. And Japan has been trying to defend their currency against speculators and to tame down their or tamp down their inflation. And so they actually started raising rates, but it isn't enough, and their currency continues to decline. And as that's taken place, it's an interesting thing because Japan is the biggest holder of U.S. Treasury bills. They own about 1.2 trillion of U.S. Treasury or bonds and bills. And as we all know, the U.S. bond market is a very important indicator for monetary policy and where things are going. And so the U.S. has a very strong interest in seeing Japan not sell those bills and bonds, because to do so, they would put them in the marketplace and interest rates would go up, and higher interest rates, is going to make the Ponzi scheme that they've got going with fiat currency even worse, because the deficits will get larger. And so Scott Bessent, U.S. Treasury Secretary, came out and said, Yeah, we think it's time to help out the Japanese. We're going to defend the yen by selling euros and
Mhm.
using the proceeds to purchase uh, yen. And probably the more important, which is important in and of itself, but probably the even more important statement is he reminded everybody that the U.S. Federal Reserve has an account, I don't know what you call it, a program, I would guess you would say, in place called FEMA, where they can issue a swap line to a foreign country in order to help that foreign country, if they need cash, so to speak. And so I think what happened probably is Basent got a call from the Japanese that said, look, we got to defend our currency and our oil import costs are going up. We're going to have to sell some of your treasury bonds. And Basent said, no, 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 don't do that. One, we'll help you with the currency, we'll intervene. And two, I'll remind everybody that the Federal Reserve has a swap line. That swap line happens to be established by law, and it's $60 billion in size. And what probably the most interesting part of all of Basent's statements was that he said, and furthermore, if I think the 60 billion should be enlarged. And I'm like, what? I mean, 60 billion is a big number, and they're talking about even enlarging it more. And up until this point in time, Japan has used about $90 billion to defend the yen. So they're burning a lot of money to try and keep the system together. And this swap line, people might say, well, what's a swap line? Well, fine. So Japan needs money to defend their currency. Japan would sell the treasury bonds, all else equal. What we say to them is, no, no, no. You pledge those bonds to us, and we will issue you newly printed cash, i.e., basically must click money. We'll give you new cash, and you can use that to defend your currency with. So you don't have to sell the bonds,
Mhm.
but we will print it into existence. And so the market, hearing that we were willing to do this, it was always known, but he emphasized it, and that perhaps it should be bigger than 60 billion. The market woke up and noticed that, and so gold went up $200 in 3 days. It was up 7% for that week, and the gold stocks went up 17%. They haven't done that in 20 years, and so that was the beginning of it all. I think that kind of started the trend towards, hey, hang on a second, maybe up until now the narrative has been that Kevin Warsh is a hawk and is going to raise interest rates and they're going to keep inflation under control and nobody needs sound money investments anymore. This whole monetary debasement trade is dead. That's been the talk since Warsh became, got announced as Fed chair and then got installed as Fed chair. Okay, so that was step one, and that happened a week and a half ago. Step two was yesterday, particularly. He came out and he said, we've been rebuying these long ends of the treasury. And so this is a little bit technical, but it's pretty straightforward. The Fed issues debt. They issue long debt and they issue short debt. And they've been leaning towards, yeah, right. We're over 40 trillion now. It's amazing. They've been leaning towards the short side because it's cheaper. It rolls over more quickly, but they've been leaning towards that. And when they've been doing is really actually conducting something that's kind of like, it's called an Operation Twist. Bernanke did it back in the day, where they issue short-term bonds and then use them to buy long-term bonds. So there's no really increase or decrease in the amount of bonds outstanding. But what there is a bias towards issuing the shorter ones, which are cheaper, and buying the longer ones, which are more indicative of inflation and which are the things they don't want to see get out of control. So that's kind of what they call the Treasury repurchase program. And they also have a reserves management program where they're just outright buying bonds, and that's been running between 10 and 40 billion a month. So, and they call that reserves management, not QE, not money printing, but that's not true. It is QE and it is money printing. Okay, so, but anyway, what happened a day ago or 2 days ago now, I guess, is that Basent said, this $2 billion limit that we have on these purchases per operation, we're going to double that to 4, implying that we're going to now be able to buy more per operation than we did in the past. And, if you look at it realistically, I mean, the context of 40 trillion of debt, a couple billion isn't a big number. But I think, and just as the whole FEMA, increase the Japan swap line, it's big, but they haven't even tapped it yet. But I think what both of these things said and indicated to the market is, oh my, this is a treasury that's willing to print money or force the Fed to print money to keep the system going. And obviously it must be on their minds, because why would he have made these announcements, right? So I think the market kind of woke up to oh, you know what, maybe we've got this whole, Warsh is a hawk, the debasement trade is over. Maybe we're wrong about that. And of course, the price of gold and the price of Bitcoin both noticed. So that's kind of a quick summary of what I think just happened.
Yeah. Do you think Warsh is actually, he gets Bitcoin, right? There was an interview where he
Oh
actually.
yeah.
So in terms of like legislation that's being drafted, the Clarity Act and all that, do you think that this is something that will happen anytime soon, or is that still?
I'm not an expert on Washington politics, and I don't know. This is all very arcane. I know it's been kind of in some trouble and it's been slow. I know that the administration is pushing hard for it. I'll say that. Let me just say a little bit of why I think they're pushing for it, and what they hope to get out of it. I mean, one of the things that's very clear that the Treasury is trying to do is push stable coins, which really, Tether and Circle have really become, kind of US CBDCs, because they can now confiscate your stable coins. So stable coins are not Bitcoin, right?
No.
Stable coins are a dollar denominated form of Bitcoin that is they're actually backed by treasuries behind them. And I think the U.S. administration would like to have the stablecoin market grow, because the stablecoin market is a buyer for treasuries, and of course they need more buyers for treasuries, right? That's their problem. They've got too much debt. The problem is that and so they think it's kind of a panacea. They think if we pass this Clarity Act, this will all be very clearly delineated, and the stablecoin market will grow a lot, and that'll help us with our debt problem. That's the theory. The practice is that they've only got about $300 billion of stablecoins outstanding now. It's not growing very rapidly, and they need to roll over about $9 trillion worth of debt every year. So 300 compared to 9 trillion, or 300 compared to 9,000, it's not a huge number.
Mm-hmm.
As for the politics, I just don't know. I think they probably will figure out a way to get it through. I think what's holding it up is the banking lobby and Jamie Dimon and all the people who don't want to see it get passed, because it represents a threat, a threat to their system. But my guess is there'll be some sweeteners somewhere, and it'll eventually get passed. That's just a guess.
So my intuition tells me that all the lobbies and all the legacy financial controllers, well, they don't like the idea of self custody. So they will want people to to hold Bitcoin for them. So therefore, ETFs will be promoted. Any idea, like any sort of hack, like the cold cards shit show we had, or anything that is basically exposing the challenges with self custody, will probably be pumped in the media, and they will make everything they will do everything to make sure that you buy your Bitcoin, you keep it with the bank, right?
I think that's definitely true. I mean, I think they want the Bitcoin within their system, and that way they could 6102 it, which is what that's the executive order that Roosevelt used to grab gold. I mean, I don't see that as a high risk right now, but in the future, who knows who's president? President AOC, might determine that sound money is evil and that she has to grab it all. Who knows? I mean, try and do it. But you're right. I mean, and of course, there are those who are conspiratorial, think, oh, the cold card thing was just, it was all set up, and they were behind it, blah, blah, blah. I don't think so. I think sadly it was just the cold card guys fucked up, and which is tragic, because I know NVK. I thought he was a pretty good guy, but obviously, from an engineering perspective, they made an incredibly bad mistake, which cost people that I know a lot of money. It's really sad.
Oh yeah. And I think that reputation got a big hit, but also to me it feels like maybe this is our don't trust, verify 2.0 moment, where we actually very we put all the resources, like the Team Red with Kale, they're putting a lot of compute and AI resources and a lot of talent as well to validate all the open source Bitcoin tools and wallets, and identify any vulnerabilities. So I think maybe this was needed actually to cleanse us.
Perhaps. I mean, it's sadly, we're pioneering a new area. We're pioneering a new technology. I mean, shit's going to go wrong. People are going to make mistakes. I mean, you read about the adoption of electricity in the United States way back when. I mean, there were problems. I mean, some people got electrocuted. I mean, it's not a lot, but I mean, it's like, sadly, errors get made. I mean, in early aviation, there were a lot of unnecessary plane crashes because, we made fucking mistakes. And so, it's interesting, because Cold Card was so worried. I mean, I never used one, but the whole sales pitch was you got this air gapping, which prevents the possibility of somebody lurking on your computer and being able to grab your transaction or mess with your transaction. And not to the best of my knowledge, that really wasn't a big risk. That hasn't happened very much, but they solved for that risk, and they blew it on the entropy risk. And I just watched Efrat talking to the guy, the chief technology officer at Trezor, who is the hard wallet that I use. And I got very comfortable that Trezor is actually probably the best hard wallet solution out there, which doesn't, doesn't surprise me. They've been around the longest, and I think they've been the most careful in their approach.
Absolutely.
So.
I think, I don't want, I don't know NVK. I don't know NVK, and I don't want to, drag him under the train again. But if you look into the whole timeline of what happened, they took the open source code from Trezor.
Right.
They worked on that. They closed it because then the guys from Foundation took, they forked them as an open source code, and then when they closed the code, this was introduced. So yeah, I think.
Well, the other thing about the Trezor approach, as I understand it, and I'm not a software engineer, is that they're getting their entropy or their randomness from a number of different sources, and so in so doing, it would be extremely hard for AI to kind of backward engineer into the entropy. Now, like I say, I'm not an engineer, so I can't prove that that's true. But the one hardware wallet that I still trust with a pretty high level is Trezor. So.
Agree, Larry. I want to use our time and pick your brains on some things that you're most famous for. So let's go back in time a little bit. I want to talk about the forgotten school of Austrian economics. Like,
sure.
Why has the Austrian school of economics been kind of sidelined in modern academia and policy making? What do you make of that?
I talked about this in my book. I mean, my book lays it out very clearly. I mean, it didn't really serve the interests of the people who were in positions of power. I mean, Keynesian economics is perfectly designed to give economists power and to give politicians power, because the Keynesian economic model suggests that they know better than the rest of us, and they can and should intervene in free markets. And rather than letting the price of money, which is probably the most important price in the world, be set by supply and demand, that they need a committee to do it, the Federal Reserve and so on and so forth. And so, so we've got this corrupted system that was kind of originally proposed by John Maynard Keynes, who was really a bad guy in many ways. We don't need to go there. But, the Keynes kind of said to the governments, hey, look, I'll get you all the money you want. You just got to follow this model, and you got to listen to me. And so it got, and so economists got a lot of money for being advisors and being Keynesians and figuring shit out and so on and so forth. And there's all kinds of evidence that, there are journals of monetary economics, and all the people who were the editors of those journals are Keynesians and get paid by the Federal Reserve. I mean, and so, and the Fed, chair is very powerful. They make a lot of money. They make a lot of money afterwards. I mean, Janet Yellen made $7 million giving speeches, which, she can't have enough to say that's worth $7 million. And that's all because the banks those are bribes, really. And so, that whole model of, you scratch our back, Fed, and get us the money, and we'll scratch your back and get you the money and make you powerful and make you the wizards of the monetary system. That's all very self-serving to those two parties. And the Austrian economists said, you don't need any of this. Just stick to sound money, and the interest rate, a natural interest rate, will emerge, and that's what you should have. But that's not very convenient. That, I think the Fed employs over 1,000 PhD economists, right? It's like socialism for economic PhDs. I mean, and it's been rumored that Bernanke, after he left, he's on the board of Citadel. I think he might have been on the board of PIMCO. I mean, these guys are getting $20 million a year in advisory fees, right? I mean, it's a hell of a gig for economists and so forth. So, and the politicians love it. I mean, right from the get-go, the Fed was set up, and they said, we're only going to, it was Walter Baggett, we're only going to lend, money in real extreme situations at penalty rates and quickly unwind it. That was the whole reason for setting up the Fed. So we didn't have another 1907 where JP Morgan had to save the world. And then, of course, they immediately got into World War II or World War I, and the government didn't know how to finance itself. And the Fed said, no problem. We'll set these bonds at 3.5% and Liberty bonds, and we'll let you guys, the banks, borrow for 3%, and you get 50 basis points free, right? And so it became just a big tool to subsidize the banks. And of course, it created enormous inflation. I mean, the period of World War I, price level basically doubled. Between the price of something before World War I and after World War I went up 100%, and all because of that money printing. So, this is a racket that and we've all come to accept it as normal, right? That this is just normal. Like inflation is just, you got to have it. And I argue with Keynesians. They're like, look, if you don't have inflation, you're not going to have growth. You're not going to have a healthy economy. Deflation is bad. Deflation is evil. I mean, Janet Yellen said, to justify some of her printing operations, she said, there was a quote in my book that talked about how she said, we basically, we have to avoid the possibility of falling into a deflationary spiral. I was just like, and what happened in 29 was a deflationary spiral, but that's because they allowed an inflationary bubble to occur in front of it. And so a deflationary spiral is not, a realistic issue or risk. Well, it is if you're highly levered like we are now. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that deflation is actually good. Over time, in a properly functioning economy, over time, things should become cheaper. I mean, good examples of this are technology, right? The TVs that we used to spend thousands for are now hundreds, and the computers that, the compute power is going up enormously. And so this human ingenuity makes things better, faster, cheaper over time, and everyone should benefit from that. But because the credit system is built on a system that requires increasing debt and increasing growth in the money supply, a lot of that deflationary benefit that we're supposed to achieve gets siphoned off to the people up top, the quintillionaires who are able to borrow cheap and invest in carry trade. So it's a really broken system. I mean, Endo, you know all this, but I'm kind of reiterating that because you asked me to kind of, for your audience, walk you through the basics, right?
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's it feels like that somebody's trying to defy gravity. Like we've got a set of rules, and they just work.
Yeah. That really is true, and you know what? And it feels like we're kind of at that Wile E. Coyote moment where we're really out over the cliff on this fiat financial system, and and we're about to go straight down. I mean, just because that it's gotten so big now, the prints have gotten so big, the debt's gotten so big, the compounding is so large, the inflation is so ingrained, and probably more importantly, more and more people are coming to see what's going on, and they're joining the camp that you and I have been in for a bunch of years. And the book talks about this. I mean, fiat currencies fail when everyone realizes they can't stop printing mathematically. And if you look at the system as the way it's constructed, they really can't stop printing, because if they do, they don't have enough money to pay the debt they've already created. So they have to create more money to service the old debt. That's the nature of a Keynesian credit-based growth model. And so as a result of that, and the fact that they can't stop printing, you and I know it. Back in 1990, nobody knew it. 2000, a few of us knew it. Now it's 2025. A lot of us know it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe gold and Bitcoin people and people who understand this real problem, maybe we're 5% of the population today. I don't know. We're more than 1 and maybe less than 10. Maybe we're 5. But does that sound
agree.
right?
I'm
Yeah.
I think more than 1, yes. 5. I'm not sure. I'm currently in Poland, and people in Poland, Poland is doing well now. It's really booming economy. We finally caught up with the West. But I can see, whenever I talk about Bitcoin, there is obviously a confusion between Bitcoin and crypto, which I try to differentiate and say, okay, we're talking about digital gold or digital casino. If you win in digital casino, get out of a casino.
That's a great way to describe it. Yeah.
Simple words, but what I notice is that people say, well, properties like real estate, that's where what an investment is. And I say,
they understand. I mean, I think maybe only 5% of us understand that gold and Bitcoin are the solution. I bet probably 20 or 30% of the population understands that inflation's a real problem that's not going away. I mean, because they see it, right? You go to the supermarket and you see it. And I guess the point I was driving toward was that basically when everyone comes to see that they can't stop printing, that's when these currencies fail. That's when Venezuela failed. That's when Zimbabwe failed. That's when Weimar failed. I mean, and right now, the percentage of us who see that is pretty low. And arguably, maybe they could go back the other way. I mean, there's no guarantee that we're headed towards hyperinflation. I mean, I think we might be over a course of kind of a 10-year window. But if they were ever to start to get responsible and to stop printing more money, and to stop spending more than they bring in, they could reverse this trend. But if you look at the United States and the political setup in the United States, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that supports that we're going in that direction, right?
Do you see, people say that the fiat currencies will fall and the dollar might be the last one to actually
Yes.
live the longest. Can you explain that a little bit? Like, how would that affect?
Yeah, that's my good friend Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory, and his theory is that the fiat cracks at the margins on the smaller currencies rather than the larger currency, and that there's more of a Lindy effect with the dollar. I mean, just so many people hold it, it'll be the last one to fail. And he may be right. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think they're all failing. I prefer, when I talk to Brent, we have these debates, and I say, you might be right about the dollar failing last, but that's not really what I look at. What I look at is, I look at all of these fiat currencies compared to silver and gold and Bitcoin, and they're all failing in those terms, and the bonds are all failing in those terms, and that's the more important issue. But yeah, I mean, it's the smaller countries will get hurt first by a strong dollar, and people have dollar-denominated debts, so that creates a certain amount of demand for the dollar because people have to raise dollars to service those debts, and we see this now with Japan being kind of the first country to have some currency problems, right? But
you mentioned they hold 1.2 trillion.
1.2 trillion in treasury debt. Yeah.
How do you see that unwind? Like, is there anything you have in mind, or is that unknown?
I don't know. I mean, I don't honestly see the countries dumping it. I guess we haven't really talked about this yet, but there's what I think will happen. Let's talk about how kind of the next 5 years unfold. I think what we're heading toward is something called yield curve control, and yield curve control is pretty simply explained by looking at the mathematics of a debt doom loop. So let's just think about this in simple terms. The problem is that the U.S. is running a deficit every year of, call it $2 trillion. And so the U.S. needs to sell debt to pay for that deficit, right? That's money they don't have. They collect tax revenue, but they spend $2 trillion more than they collect. So they sell debt to raise the $2 trillion, which is what makes the $40 trillion of debt get bigger every year. And in fact, it gets bigger than that because they're not really even accounting for the deficit correctly. But let's set all that aside.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a big piece of that $2 trillion, right now, the U.S. is spending about $1.3 trillion a year in interest expense on all the existing debt. So that's, if they didn't have the interest expense, the deficit wouldn't be so large.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result of this, every time the interest rates go up, they have to pay more on, their debt. And so the $2 trillion gets bigger. So, well, that implies that they have to sell more than, the $2 trillion at 2.5 or 3 trillion. And so the debt burden gets even bigger, and then the interest burden gets even bigger. And by the way, they're selling that debt burden into a debt market of a certain size. If there's so much demand for debt at one level, you come with more debt to be sold. Well, maybe people demand higher interest rates still. And so what you can see here is you kind of get into a circular doom loop where, and this has happened in a lot of small countries where, interest rates just keep jacking out and going higher. And, that creates a bigger deficit, which creates more debt sales, which creates higher interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. It's a doom loop. The solution to this, and this is what many countries have done in the past, and what I think the U.S. will ultimately be forced into, and by the way, this isn't an old story. A new story. We did this in World War II. I mean, we had a similar debt to GDP level in World War II. We're fighting, fascism, and what they did is they did yield curve control, and so the Fed went out and said, okay, look, we can't have these interest rates going higher. We need to keep these interest rates at a fixed level. Because if they get too big, the deficits will get big. The whole thing will come unwound. So we're going to solve that problem. We're going to basically cap the 10-year, let's say, call it at 3.5, and cap the 1 or 2 year, let's call it 1%. And if it doesn't stay there, we'll buy the debt, to keep it there. We'll enter the market and put a bid in for the debt to keep, to bring the rates down. There'll be new purchases which will minimize rates. Okay. Well, okay, but where are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? With whose money, right? I mean, it's not like you got money just laying around to buy that debt. No, with newly created money. We're going to print the money to buy our own debt so that we keep the interest rates down. And, so Fed's balance sheet, which is a proxy for the outstanding base level of money, is about $6.6 trillion right now. And before Bernanke got going, it was 900 billion, and he printed 3 trillion, and then Powell printed another 5. It went to 9. We brought it back to mid sixes. Okay, fine. So the Fed comes in and says, all right, we're gonna fix these interest rates at 3.5%, and we're gonna fix the short rate at 1%. And bond market, if you don't like that, tough shit. And the bond market's gonna look at it and go, hang on, you mean to tell me you want me to buy a 10-year bond at 3.5% when I know inflation is running at 6 or 7? I'm not doing that. No, okay, Fed, sold to you. You can have my bond. And so the Fed says, all right, yeah, I'm buying it. I'm buying it at the 3.5% yield. And suddenly the Fed balance sheet goes from 6 trillion to 20 trillion, right? I mean, that's the next move. And by the way, that extra 14 is all new money in the system, which then becomes inflation, right?
Exactly.
So that's what that's what my book described, which is really kind of quote unquote the big print, right? So they're forced to print money to defend their system. And look, lots of emerging economies have done this in the past. And these are the prelude steps to a currency failure, unless you really get nominal and real growth going. I mean, we did it in World War II, and it would have been a problem, except that after World War II, we got a lot of growth in housing, autos, demographics, et cetera. So we kind of quote unquote grew our way out of that debt burden. But just as a reminder, it was very inflationary in that time frame. Very few people know this, but in the 50s, there was a year where year over year prices went up 18%. So yeah, right. So yeah, you can maybe diminish your debt, but only by inflating the shit out of the money supply. So on a relative basis. So, I mean, all of these things to me are what lead to the conclusion that you absolutely positively have to own sound money, if you're trying to save money. Otherwise, they're gonna rob from you by inflating it.
So that leads nicely to one of the other questions I had prepared for you about the fact that history is written by the winners, and the fact that U.S. has gone to war with many countries, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and now Iran as well, and in some of those conflicts, I think a vast amounts of gold were also confiscated, or some like in one way or another, their order was imposed on those countries. And obviously, years later, we get to read the history books and just get whatever the reporters of the media were saying and wanted us to hear and to learn about that.
Right.
I think it's like I'm getting to the point where I through Bitcoin I start questioning a lot of things, and what are the real world consequences of the fact that the history is written by the winners? And when it comes to the monetary history, the demonetization of gold and the narrative about central banking, are there any truths that are buried you can give us?
Well, I mean, it's what's led us down this path. But math is basically what's going to lead us back to a return to sound money, because in my view, I mean, we've marched down this path and we've kicked the can, and with each intervention we've figured out a new intervention, and it's just kind of like whatever the price is, let's keep the system going. And really, we know what the price is. The price is just inflation, right? And as long as they can control it and bring it back down, and people didn't think it was going to last forever, the populace was happy. I mean, obviously there was pain involved. I mean, when Volcker took rates to 20%, there was a lot of pain. But he controlled inflation. We got it back under control. But we're not in a Volcker world anymore. He did that when debt to GDP was 30%. Now it's 120. So I think that they've kept everything within their narrative, and they've kept everything. They keep pulling a rabbit out of the hat to kick the can and keep the system going. What I think will upset their apple cart is when the inflation becomes really obvious and really persistent. The way it's likely to become, given the policies that we are now pursuing. And so, when we get into the next bout of inflation, in my opinion, will probably be double digit and will be multi-year. And when that occurs, I think a lot of people are going to wake up and say, God, I can't take it anymore. We got to solve this. We've got to return to sound money. Now, how fast that happens, how many people wake up, what's the time frame? I mean, those are all difficult questions to answer, and a lot of it honestly depends on the politics. I mean, what policies do they pursue? I mean, we still theoretically we still could walk back from the brink if we balance our budget, I think. But again, I'm not sure that's really in the cards without some kind of a major crisis. And I think this crisis is likely to, basically lead to a currency reset of some kind. I mean, Bessent's even alluded to this. And a lot of people have talked about remarking the gold and in the
Hmm.
United States and revaluing it up higher. And it would have to go a lot higher, by the way. 5,000 wouldn't do it. It's got to go to 25,000. And then of
So
course,
if
yeah.
that happens, I know that China is buying gold very
Oh
aggressively.
yeah, very much, yeah.
If that repricing happens, would US be able to, like, what would be their move? Would they be willing to repay the debt or part of it,
Well, I
or
think that's right. Or probably more importantly, what would they could pay down some of the debt, which would help on a go forward basis. But two, probably more importantly, we would if we truly did. I mean, it's not just revaluation alone is only a part of the solution, and would kind of it'd be another band-aid that would allow them to pay down some debt and keep kicking the can on fiat money for a while. I think the better and more permanent solution, which would, by the way, would be more painful, but would solve it on the other side, would be to say we're actually returning to a sound money standard, wherein we cannot run deficits. We will not run deficits. If we don't have it in the treasury, we won't spend it. And by the way, we stand ready to exchange, 1 ounce of gold for $35,000. You can come to the treasury, give us an ounce of gold, we'll give you $35,000, or you can give us $35,000 and we'll give you an ounce of gold.
Yeah.
And we're going to just let the gold price, it's going to fluctuate, and then interest rates are going to be set by what are people willing to lend, gold or dollars at, not the Federal Reserve. We're going to shut the Federal Reserve down. I mean, this all sounds kind of unrealistic and like a utopia, but when in fact the whole thing is kind of failing and coming apart. I mean, if the currency really does fail or comes close to failing, i.e. we have South America, 15, 20, 30% inflation rates, or, the same kind of inflation rates like that Turkey had recently, that we might actually get to that solution. And that is the right solution. Now, the problem is the politics of it all. I mean, it's, and so there's an argument that the flip argument is that we won't get to that solution. Even those high rates won't work. The Democrats will get control. AOC will say, okay, we're going to send you all kinds of money. We're going to print it. Stephanie Kelton will be the Treasury Secretary. She's the modern monetary thesis woman who says deficits don't matter. And they'll just print the currency into oblivion and the dollar will fail. And at that point in time, it'll be pretty obvious what happened and how we did it. And I think everyone will start trading in Bitcoin and gold and silver. And a new system will emerge with those as the underlying sound money assets. And Michael Saylor, who's a very visionary and very accomplished historian and very visionary thinker, you're right. China has made the bet on gold. We now are, it's interesting. The U.S. is going out of its way to claim we've got all the gold. They got Rand Paul going down to Fort Knox saying it's all there. They got Treasury Secretary Bessent going, hey, it's all there. I'm like, why should we believe you guys? But maybe it is all there. I don't think it really matters. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be that expensive to audit it. But Saylor's view is, hey, let's sell all that gold and buy Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's digital gold. It's a better form of gold, and in the longer run, we would leapfrog China in so doing. And who knows? Maybe President Saylor in 2034 or 2036 or whatever will do that. But this is all way out in the future. It's hard to know exactly how it's going to unfold.
Yeah, but looking at the moves of the establishment, and it feels like the road is being laid for those new payment rails to be built on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So they're not saying that out
Very
loud.
much so. I mean, but Bessent, when he came in, he said, I'm a gold bug. And he also has said he's in favor of Bitcoin. Stephen Moran is very much in favor of Bitcoin. I mean, Trump family, and they're in favor of Bitcoin. They're also in favor of their own shit coins, which is annoying as hell. But
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and they're pushing these CBDCs, which otherwise known as stable coins. They're pushing those very hard, right? Because they can control those. I mean, they got Circle to bend the knee, they got Tether to bend the knee. So yeah, I mean, that's all very favorable. But remember, this is this is the red administration. This is, and let's say the blue administration wins in 2 years. I mean, not just this fall, but I mean the presidential election in 2 years. They're going to have a pretty easy case to make that crypto's bullshit and Trump robbed the American people of $2 billion and clearly, all this stuff is bad and we've got to tax Bitcoin. Maybe we should even try and ban Bitcoin, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. Now, they're going to have a hard time because BlackRock and Fidelity and Vanguard and all these other ETFs have come in and, I don't think they're going to be able to ban it, but they could tax it. They could, I mean, there are various things they could do to make it, to try and set it back. And, so it's, I mean, we'll see. I mean, there's going to be push and tug and the fight's not over yet, right? I mean, the Democratic, Keynesian people, hate us. I mean, they absolutely hate us because we're messing up their system. I mean, and so, the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, if they could, they would figure out some way to throw a wrench in what we're doing. Unfortunately, we're so far down the road, I don't think they can kill it, but they can mess with us for a while, no doubt. So
yeah. For sure. I wonder, how coming back to stable coins, and you say, that Tether is going to be a CBDC for the US, maybe with Circle. How will that develop and compete with the European central bank digital currency, the digital euro that apparently
I don't know. I mean, you would know that better than I do because I don't really know very much about the digital euro. Is there any real usage there? I mean, is it getting picked up or used
it's just that there's none. There's none, and I keep on hearing that any minute now they will have something.
Oh yeah. I know.
It's just.
I mean, look, the stable coin market is an interesting market, as I understand it. When I went to Bitcoin Prague, I met with some Russian businessmen. I understood it. The stable coin market is really. What it is it's a payment rail that avoids SWIFT and the U.S. payment system. I mean, when we did something really stupid in 2022 or 2022, we seized those Russians' assets, right? The Ukraine war broke out, and we said, hey, that was wrong. We hate you guys. We grabbed, I don't know, a lot of their money. It was 600 billion or something. It was a big number. And everybody around the world took note of that. It was like, holy shit, these guys. I got money in the Western banking system. They can grab it if they don't like what I'm doing politically. Oh my God. And they also sanctioned Iran and Russia in terms of the SWIFT network. And they said, okay, you can't send wires through our network anymore. Well, as I discovered in Prague, talking to these guys, so you're a Russian business person, you're trying to do business outside of Russia, you're making transfers to Germany, whatever, you got to pay for shit. You're sending them stuff, they're sending you stuff, and you can't use SWIFT anymore. What do you do? Well, okay, you get a Kraken account, right? And you don't want to do it in Bitcoin because Bitcoin's too volatile. But there's Circle, there's Tether. You send me an invoice for $1 million, and I'll instantly settle with you over the crypto rails. I'll send you $1 million worth of Tether, and we're square, right? And so that's what really created the stablecoin market. It was an alternative to the Western banking SWIFT network, and it was a good use case. And when Tether was not captured by the U.S. government, which was for a long time, I think the Russians could really trust it and everybody could trust it. But now we've seen Tether admit that they will, they can confiscate coins that go to addresses they don't like, and that they can, they can turn some of their coins into shit, so to speak. So it really means that the government controls it now. So these stable coins are not just free market coins. I mean, and which is interesting. You remember when Iran was talking about, okay, we're going to start putting tolls on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. And, the only thing they would accept payment for was Bitcoin. And when they were talking about that, and I thought, that's interesting. They're not stupid. They get it. If you send Bitcoin to their Bitcoin address, unless that's it. Yeah. There's no way to grab it if you don't have those keys. So, so it's very interesting, all these moves and counter moves that are geopolitically taking place.
Totally. Let's jump to geopolitics because
Sure.
I want to also see what you think about the overall macro and geopolitical shifts in the next 10 to 20 years. Is there any geopolitical shifts you see unfolding?
Well, the U.S.
crisis or
it's going to have to become we're going to have to become much more of a multipolar world. I mean, and the U.S. just really, in my view, we shot ourselves in the foot. Maybe it was intentional, I don't know, but we shot ourselves in the foot with this Iranian action. I mean, we showed that it was just stupid. We showed that drones beat aircraft carriers and missiles can beat jets and so forth. And we've diminished ourselves, truly, in my view. And kind of concurrent with that, we've seen this enormous, and I think it's very important, we've seen this enormous trend toward, the dollar is still being used, it's still the reserve currency, but more and more less so. I mean, I think one of the big developments of the last 5 years that's really affected the gold market a lot is that, it used to be that if a Saudi, company was shipping oil to China, they would ship an invoice in dollars and get paid in dollars. And that's changed. I mean, they can now ship oil to China and China will send them yuan. And the Saudis might say, well, yeah, some of these yuan we'll use because we're buying some stuff from you. We'll pay, we'll use the yuan to buy it. But China's made it extraordinarily easy to send the oil, get the yuan, and then instantly transfer it into the Shanghai Gold Exchange and turn it into gold. Whereas in the past, those reserves, the money that Saudi earned from selling oil would have gotten converted into treasury bills because they were the stable base layer asset of the world. And now it's kind of like, nah, we're not going to do that anymore. Those treasury bills aren't holding value. We're going to convert them. And so you've seen this. I mean, you've got Russia selling oil for rupees. You've got China doing, for rubles. You've got China doing it with rupees. You got, India doing it with rupees. All these different countries are exchanging in their own currencies, and mainly because they don't trust the dollar as much. It's not as good a store of value. And while it'll still probably be a medium of exchange for a long, long time because there's so much momentum behind it, I think it used to be that all FX transactions, like the dollar was like 95% of them. And I saw a statistic that said that slipped to like 60 or 70%. So, and that's these alternative things are popping up. And it's just because I think the world is coming to understand. I mean, they're not blind and they can see what's going on with our fiscal situation as well. And, anybody who's held US Treasury bonds, longer dated US Treasury bonds, the last 5 or 10 years, they've just gotten killed. I mean, they've just, they've lost a ton of value because everybody knows we're inflating the currency. So you're getting to kind of these multi-currency, multipolar worlds, and the U.S. isn't necessarily going to be able to throw its weight around and enforce itself. And I mean, we had, as the French used to say, we had this exorbitant privilege from having this money that we could print, right? And everybody trusted it. And I think what's happened is that trust is, look at that. Isn't that amazing? God, isn't that something? What's happened is this trust has been broken, and so, and so we're going to pay a price for that. And by the way, as the dollar continues to slide, I mean, that's inflationary for the U.S. I mean, the price of everything we buy that foreigners send us cheaply, it's going to get more expensive, right? So
exactly. Larry, we touched on Iran and what happened there. It feels that maybe U.S. was actually pushed into this war by another country.
Yeah, right.
And I was scrolling, those websites. WTF happened in 1971. There's a bunch of nice charts.
That's amazing. That's amazing, isn't it? That one chart of debt growth.
Yeah. But I came across it. I want to pick your brains on a little bit of conspiracy theory. This one here.
Oh yeah, look at that! Wow, I was not aware of that. It does not surprise me.
And I was thinking,
this is like the third rail. I've been advised by my wife never to talk about this because I don't want to be called an anti-Semite.
Fair play. But
Look, the notion, So I'm not an anti-Semite. I have a ton of Jewish friends. I respect the Jewish religion. I do think that the actual country of Israel, in my view, has misbehaved, and I think a lot of other countries around the world would share that view with me.
Totally. I don't want to push you into that.
And I think it's and I think it's sad that a lot of our politicians are in their pocket. I mean, I'm very much of the view that our politicians should worry about the United States first, and so forth. But that's as far as I'll go. But it's unfortunate. I mean, it's really unfortunate. I mean, hopefully, the one thing that's arguably somewhat of a bright spot is that maybe this setback, and I really do call the Iran war a setback. I mean, I think we kind of schooled. I mean, and the best thing in my view Trump can do is declare victory, which isn't true, but that's fine. Let him declare victory and just get out. And hopefully things will kind of go back to somewhat normal over time, and we'll have a smaller footprint in the Middle East, which would be an intelligent thing. Would have been an intelligent thing without the war. I mean, the notion of the U.S. as the world's policeman, I'm not a big fan of that. I think that burden should be shared by all countries. So,
Yeah,
it is what it is.
I'm again, I'm looking at, I don't live in Poland anymore, but I'm kind of keeping an eye on what's going on here. And obviously, Poland is neighboring with Ukraine and neighboring with Russia. And Poland historically has been very vocal around, the independence of Poland and how, Russian influence was being imposed on us. Um, and it feels that we have become effectively American, kind of puppet state. Like we are
Right.
buying everything from them. We're buying gold from states. Well, our president of the central bank is. He's got a big, good reputation for buying gold lower. And look at it, him being a genius right now. Gold went up, and he made so much money on that. But hardly anybody mentions that actually 80% of the gold that Poland purchased is in the United States or London.
Oh yeah. Well, it's
And
and that actually brings forward the possession is 9/10 of the law comment. I mean, it's kind of not your keys, not your coins, right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, maybe you might want to write some letters to your leaders, because a lot of other countries over the years, the Netherlands, Germany, France, etc., have basically gone to the U.S. and called to have the gold that we stored for them. I mean,
Right.
a lot of the gold ended up here because in World War II, the notion was that that all these countries were going to get overrun, and they didn't want the gold to go into the wrong hands, and so they sent it to us for safekeeping. I would suggest to most countries that it's smarter to hold it than to to self custody it than to let somebody else custody it. But that's for the Polish electorate to decide. I think you should hold your own gold.
Yeah, I think so too. Or like if we've got a big pile of gold, maybe there's another like hard money asset that we could self custody ourselves. I don't think that.
Yeah, I wonder what that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, there is a country. El Salvador is going this way.
absolutely.
They've
Have
been
you seen any political interest in Poland for Bitcoin? Is there any awareness of it or thought? Has it been talked about or thought about, positive or negative, or is it just not really on the radar screen?
So there's a one, particular development happening around the regulation. In Europe we had this thing called MiCA.
Okay.
So for the, it's effectively, an act like that's imposed by European Union on how the crypto assets should be generally regulated.
Yeah.
And the Polish government, they proposed the Polish interpretation of MiCA,
Uh-huh.
which was then vetoed by the president. And then it was presented the same way by the opposition, opposite government to the president again. And they did it like 3 times, and there was 3 times vetoed. So surprise. But the I guess positive thing is that Poland remains the only country right now that didn't sign this law into this bill into law. So
Huh.
we currently are in a limbo.
Uh-huh.
But at least we don't have the European framework for digital assets.
I see.
Um, whether this is good or not, I can't really tell.
Yeah.
Um, I was hoping that maybe this still gives us some time to come up with another solution, with something that we could alter ourselves and present and say, hey, we're not doing this MiCA thing, we're going to do something else.
Yep.
It may be partially compliant, but we want to recognize this asset as something that we want to build our future, attract talent, attract investment, and do some stuff with that. That is, of course, my wishful thinking. But let's see. There are politicians in the Polish parliament who are more on the right wing, of course, side of the parliament that understand Bitcoin. There's at least 2 or 3 politicians who declared Bitcoin in their wealth statement.
That's great.
So
No, I mean, that's a positive development, right?
yeah, I wish this was, the debate was more professional. If they only understood, the lawmakers, if they understood what they're talking about, what they're dealing with,
Yeah.
because the individuals who get it, they get it, but they are, there's a handful of people, and
Yeah.
the majority party, the government, they're not really prepared to propose and understand what they're talking about in the first place, and
Yeah.
that is really embarrassing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. People who are uneducated who talk about this stuff, it's hard to deal with.
And they're supposed to be making laws around that. Like, come on, you
Yeah,
know.
right. Yeah, it's like, come on, get some experts in here who can help you understand what you're talking about, right? Yeah, I understand that. We see that a lot here too.
So I'm hoping, you know, there's going to be some think tanks, you know, popping up maybe, and them educating the establishment or people who are in charge. Um, but let's see how that develops. You know, it's still a long way, and if anything pops up, I'm close to the, you know, with the Bitcoiners in the Polish, on the Polish scene, and you know, your opinion in some stuff would be also very very much welcome. So
Well,
I'll
I
reach
was
out.
I was going back through our DM thread, and I noticed you put me on to a guy who could translate my book into Poland. I never followed through with him, but I'm going to do that and see if I can get
Yeah,
him going on doing it, because it would be nice to have a Polish version of it. Why not, right?
that's shout out to Mr. Jester who's done who helped
Yeah,
translate.
I'd be happy to do it. Just throw it over the wall. I mean, I don't expect to make any money on these foreign translations. I just want the word to spread to as many people
I
as
think
possible.
this is a
So,
great idea. Let me pick that up as well. I know
yeah,
that this friend of mine, he's helped translate Lynn Alden's Broken Money into Polish,
yeah,
and there's been some effort there. So I'm slightly closer to this community in Poland now. So I
great.
will bring it up again and see what we can do.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Amazing, Larry. How are the puppies?
Well, so it's funny. You guys all saw my puppies. I had two West Highland Terriers. Really, rather tragically, last year they both got sick and they both passed. So we've been puppy free for a while. But if you followed my thread carefully, I don't print too many pictures of it. We just signed up to get a new puppy that was born about I don't know, a month and a half ago, and of course they got to stay with their mother for a few months until they get, you know, kind of fully developed and so forth. So we have not met. So we have a new puppy coming to our house. His name is Seamus. My wife's Irish American, and so all our dogs are named Seamus. The last one was Finnegan. And Seamus will show up this fall. Right now, he's just starting to walk, and
Amazing.
he's another West Highland Terrier. Yeah, and he's super cute. I'll put some pictures up on the thread. So uh,
Fantastic.
yeah, it's a great breed. It's a great dog. So
It's a
yeah.
beautiful dog indeed. Yes. Well, I'm missing a dog, and since we're doing Bitcoin walks in Madeira, which is, you know, beautiful, very.
Is that your new home? Where are you? Are you Scotland, Madeira? What are you doing these days?
I'm moved to Madeira.
Did you?
Madeira
Okay.
is my new home. I'm currently on
Fantastic.
holiday in Poland, but I'm flying back in a couple of days.
Oh, I love Madeira, and as I haven't spoken to them recently, but aren't they talking about doing another get together on the next halving? What would that be? 7 or 8?
8, yeah,
8. I'll be
2028.
I'm there.
Amazing.
I'm definitely there.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that. That'll be a lot of fun. That last one was fantastic.
So
Yeah.
in Madeira, you know, I was invited to join the Free Madeira Association.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'll be probably responsible for parts of the conference as well, which I, you know, look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting you there.
Well, count me in. I'll bring my wife, and it'll be a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's gonna be fun. That's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
There's some good golfing there as well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Well, I'm just learning. I'm a pretty bad golfer so far, but I'm going to get better. By then, I might actually be able to play. We'll see.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Larry, thank you for the time. The time flies. We've been talking for an hour. I take a liberty to just put a little bit of follow.
I'm there, and then here I'll show you. Oh, God, always selling the book. There we go. It's available on Amazon.
The big trends.
Yeah, hard copy, paperback, digital, and then there's actually an audio version that Walker America read. So, you know, that's in my view, that's the story. It's the strongest argument I could make for sound money, and I think sound money is going to be really important in the next 5 or 10 years. So,
yeah, my message is always don't own zero Bitcoin. Like,
yeah, that's exactly right. You don't have to go 100%. It's pretty volatile, but you know, you could certainly, you know, most people should be able to find 5-10% at a minimum, and you know, if they're liquid assets, and of course,
and learn how to use it.
Yeah, what's that?
And learn how to use it.
Learn how to use it. Yeah, absolutely. No, in the U.S., what's really emerged, I'll give him a shout out because I just like him. I think it's a good product. I like Jack Muller's a lot. You know, I've got a Strike wallet. I've got a Strike, use their product, and I go to any Bitcoin event and I'm just paying for everything with Lightning, QR. It just works instantly. I got vendors here in Massachusetts that are Bitcoiners and they're on strike. I mean, my electrician just sends me a bill on strike and I pay him. And it's just,
Amazing.
yeah, it's using it as money is great. And that's what it's designed for. I've heard, Steak and Shake takes it, which is a hamburger joint in the US. They have a lot of them in Florida. There's one in the town in Florida that I live in, and so I go over there and pick up a hamburger and pay for it with Bitcoin. And so, yeah,
Fantastic.
it's emerging as money, but it's it takes time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Larry, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And really great to see you again, and always happy to do this. A lot of fun when we walked up that hill in Edinburgh.
We'll do that again.
Yeah. Okay. I hope so.